Welcome back to Storytime with Scott Boss. As you can see, the weather's getting warmer. I've lost my sleeves. We're going to continue with the Graveyard Gazette. We are on Chapter 10. Carrie returned home, thoughts of suicide far from his head for the first time in months. After sleeping some, he decided he was finally going to make use of his gym membership. During his breakup, he pulled the classic, I'm going to get an awesome body and make her regret leaving me move, and gotten a full year membership for the promotional price. The next time he used it would be the first, if you don't count the initial tour they gave you when you joined. And he didn't count it, though he had broken a sweat when they went through the sauna and hot tub area. When he arrived at Fitness 24/7, he remembered why he hadn't come before. There was an overall douchiness in the air, made up of protein bars, energy drinks, and Instagram posts mentioning leg day. There was also the unofficial dress code. Women with their trendy tights and loose shirts that give you a peek at their $100 sports bras. Men with their own version of tights and hoodies for some reason, topped off with too many sweatbands. Even if you got past all that, you had to compete with every form of earbud, linked by Bluetooth, not corded, God forbid, to the latest smartphone or tablet. It wasn't the membership that would do you in. He'd gotten that cheap enough even if he wasn't using it. It was all the accessories and lifestyle he couldn't afford. Carrie laughed to himself as he climbed on a treadmill in his old basketball shorts and t-shirt from a company picnic, proudly displaying the too large version of the GlaxCorp logo and an off-brand New Balance shoes. He should have brought a Walkman just to complete the ensemble. As the treadmill got up to a speed of 5 miles per hour, the highest Carrie dared to go at the moment, he looked up to a row of TVs and noticed his favorite antidepressant commercial was just ending on the one in front of him. Yeah, he muttered at the TV. Perfect family. There was a laugh next to him. Right? Said a female voice. Carrie looked over to see a girl, probably 20 or so, with her hair pulled into a green do-rag. She had a soft build and was vaguely familiar. Always so fucking happy. Makes you want to puke. Carrie laughed involuntarily. He'd had the same thought many times in the past, but never would have voiced it to a stranger. The girl was walking on her treadmill, barely above a casual stroll in the park. He kept at his pace, leaving it up to her to continue the conversation. She did. I prefer the easier stuff to get. Cough syrup, extra strength Excedrin, you know? Carrie laughed again, this time with more concern in his voice. He kept jogging. Finally the girl stopped her treadmill and turned to face him. I'm kidding. Come on, you think I was for real? Carrie responded through his heavy breathing. I was beginning to wonder. Probably not a good idea to exercise hyped up on that combo. She laughed as if it was the funniest joke she'd heard in her short time on Earth. Carrie kept jogging, wishing she'd leave him alone, but wasn't hopeful. I'm Regan, by the way. Carrie. He was struggling. 5 miles per hour was more than his body was used to, and it was starting to show. He wanted to slow down, but was afraid if he did, he'd never get away from this Regan. If he could just tough it out a few more minutes, maybe she'd give up. But she was planted, waiting him out. She went back to her machine, keeping a slow walk while glancing over at him every 10 seconds or so. Finally, he decided he wasn't going to die on this machine just to avoid a conversation with a stranger at the gym. He slowed it down until he was just walking, but even that was making his heart pump, so he hit the stop button, holding the rails and panting. Getting them gains, said Regan, who had taken the job of his life commentator that he was lacking. Don't know about that, said Carrie. Isn't that for weightlifting or something? Who knows? Can I buy you a protein shake at the bar? It took Carrie a second to realize she meant at the smoothie bar they had inside Fitness 24/7, and not an actual bar. He took a few deep breaths, then finally turned to face her. I'm sorry, do I know you from somewhere or something? Not exactly, but I think we could have an interesting discussion. Excuse me? Just come on, Carrie. She reached for his arm as if she was planning to lead him to the smoothie bar like a dog. Carrie pulled his arm back before she could get a hold of him. No offense, Regan, but aren't you like half my age? She looked him up and down. Probably, but I'm not looking for a sugar daddy or nothing. So you're just this friendly to everyone? Are you an evangelical or something? She burst out laughing again. This time it was more genuine. No, I just want to talk to you about the death of Kirby Telfair. He followed Regan to the smoothie bar and declined her offer for an overpriced smoothie, taking one of the few tables near the window overlooking the parking lot. Regan got something green and chunky looking that Carrie couldn't help but thinking of vomit. His stomach was already turning. How had this girl connected him to Kirby Telfair? Regan sat across from him, and after a long slurp of her smoothie, she began talking. How did you know? How did I know? Carrie repeated, the classic stalling tactic that was supposed to buy you time to think of a good lie. Only he'd been trying to think of anything on the way over to say besides the truth. The problem was his mind was just as blank as right after the first time Laura kissed him unexpectedly. This moment was less enjoyable. That Kirby was suicidal, she said. How did you and your friend know that he was going to do it that day? My friend? Carrie realized now why she looked familiar. The coffee shop he and Johnny had stopped in. She was the girl behind the counter. Did he say Johnny's name? Whatever. Right, John, he said, almost laughing at Johnny's not-so-secret name. Carrie realized something. She wasn't asking about the paper or the graveyard. She thought he and Johnny were just good citizens that heard Kirby was feeling down and wanted to stop him from taking his own life. At least, he thought that's what she was getting at. He feared any response he'd give until he knew more. How'd you know Kirby? I dated his brother for like a year and a half. We broke up last month. Sorry to hear that. Don't be. He's an asshole, unlike Kirby, who was a sweetheart. Okay. But I'm still in touch with her mom. We stayed friends. Almost bonded over the fact that Walt is such an asshole. I don't know. I just know it killed her to lose Kirby. I talked to her that night. We were both crying. I told her I thought it was suicide because of that conversation I picked up at the cafe. She didn't want to believe me, but ran with it. I told her of the two guys talking about it and how they wanted to stop him, but maybe it was just fate. Carrie's eyes widened to a horrible gaze, and he had to look away. How the hell has she picked up all that? They'd barely been talking above a whisper. You've got good ears. My little brother is deaf, she said nonchalantly. I read lips pretty well, but you guys weren't as quiet as you think either. Carrie put his hands on the table. Look, Regan, I'm going to be honest with you. We didn't think Kirby was suicidal. I'm actually pretty certain he wasn't. But you guys knew he was going to do it. She met Carrie's eyes. His heart ached, having to lie straight to her face. Not exactly. Me and my friend had been at Harry's diner that morning after Kirby and his buddy trashed the place. Aiden, he is such a bad influence on Kirby, or was. Like I said, Kirby is a sweetheart, but in the past few months, he'd been getting into more and more trouble hanging out with Aiden. Well, they must have been really bored that morning. They busted into Harry's and stole a gumball machine. My friend and I were driving around trying to see if we could find them and saw the gumball machine hanging out of the back of their truck. We wanted to confront them, make them go apologize or something, but when we saw the truck, it was right before they crashed into the telephone pole. As you can tell, we were both a bit shaken up from the whole scene. That's awful. You saw Kirby die? Carrie nodded. But listen, as far as we could tell, those two were just joyriding. It wasn't planned. It was just bad driving, bad decisions. Regan looked ready to accept his story, then she held up her finger. But what about fate and foreshadowing? Your friend said that, and you said something like, we're too late for this one, I think. Couldn't really see your lips as well. She was pretty dead on for not being able to see his lips. He must have been louder than he thought, caught up in the moment. Yeah, that's it, he thought. We were just caught up in the moment, seeing this kid flying out the window to his death. It was shocking. I'm surprised either of us was saying much. I think you remember it better than we do. Regan was turning it over in her head, wanting it to be more, but also knowing Carrie's answer was what she needed to hear, and what Kirby's mom did too. So you don't think he was suicidal? They walked out of Fitness 24/7 together. She gave him a hug before they headed to find their cars. She thanked him for clearing up the story so she could go tell Kirby's mom that her son was still dead, but it was an accident and not suicide. Carrie didn't know how much peace this would bring her, hopefully some. He also didn't mention that the whole suicide idea had grown because of her eavesdropping. He declined to come with her and tell Kirby's mom himself as an eyewitness. He didn't need that. The run-in with Officer Hargrove had been enough action for him, and this encounter left him feeling particularly drained. As Carrie started his car, he waited to see Regan leave the parking lot first. He hadn't brought it up, but it was awfully convenient for her to run into him on the treadmills at a gym he never goes to. If it wasn't a coincidence, then she probably knew more about him than he dared to think about. Carrie sent a group text to Johnny, Michelle, and Bruce that night, confirming the time they were meeting up. Bruce had picked up a shift that night for some overtime and would be off at the usual 7 a.m. The other three agreed to wait for him and meet up and read the paper together. It was going to be a long night, waiting for Christmas to come to the underworld. Chapter 11. It was a cold, rainy Sunday morning, the kind that made you wish the damn winter was over already when it had barely begun. Sure, it would still snow at some point in the coming months, and you'd wake up to a blanket of pure white happiness while you went about your living room just to look out the window and drink your warm coffee. It was then you'd finally do your Christmas shopping while the holiday spirit was strong. But this kind of Sunday was the day you'd decide everyone has enough toys and didn't need your hard-earned cash to buy them more shit. Still, Carrie was upbeat as he pulled into Anchor Baptist Church. He had a group of friends helping him go out and save lives. Not like a doctor performing open-heart surgery, or a policeman taking out a mall shooter. They were like four underachieving divorcees in their 40s whose main skills involved cramming together plastic pieces for hours on end until their hands were numb. To them, the Graveyard Gazette, as Carrie had been calling it in his head, was a sense of purpose they all thought was lost at that point in their lives. That's probably why they were all distraught that morning when the paper was missing. It started with Johnny chomping at the bit to get over there. He'd been the first to arrive at 6:55, waiting in the dark in his car when Michelle and Carrie arrived just after 7. Johnny got out, pulling the hood up on his coat as he chatted with them through the windows. He squinted across the street at the gate, the dark clouds and light rain obscuring his vision. When Bruce pulled in, Johnny sprinted across the road as if the final 10 seconds of waiting would kill him. The road leading to the cemetery was bare. Just the locked iron gate stared back at him defiantly. "Where the fuck is it?" Johnny yelled, as his friends joined him at the gate. "Seriously," said Michelle. "Look around." Bruce already was. "Maybe it's in the ditch." They spent the next few minutes scouring the surrounding area to no avail. Carrie stood with his back on the gate, looking out at the road. "Damn it," he said. "She must have followed me." "Ooh." Bruce climbed out of the ditch where the possum died with help from Johnny and Michelle. It would normally be funny to see an overweight former NFL player in this position, breathing hard, climbing out of a ditch, but it wasn't time for him to film a blooper reel. "Johnny," said Carrie, "remember the cafe where we stopped the other day?" "Yeah, what about it?" "The girl at the counter. She followed me to the gym last night to ask about Kirby." "She followed you?" said Johnny. "What does she know?" "Not much. Just our conversation that day, but I led her to believe we were just in shock. Still, she found me at the gym, meaning she could have followed me here one morning if she followed me there. You guys know I never go to the gym." "It's obvious," said Michelle. "You think that girl took the paper?" asked Bruce. Carrie nodded. "We've got to find her." Johnny rubbed a fist into his palm. "See what the fuck she thinks she's doing with our paper." "Agreed," said Michelle. "So where's this cafe?" asked Bruce. "Downtown," Carrie started off. "I'll drive." Belly Bean's Cafe was nestled between an insurance company and a bank. It was probably why they stayed in business over the years. Carrie parked the car and got out. Johnny followed first, then Michelle too. Bruce waved from the passenger seat. "I'll keep the car safe. No need to scare this girl." The door jingled as the other three walked in. A guy on a laptop in the corner table looked up for a brief second, then back. Carrie thought it was the same guy from the other day and wondered how much coffee he bought and how much Wi-Fi and electricity he used. There was a lady behind the counter, but no Reagan in sight. Carrie shrugged and walked up to the pastry case. "Excuse me, is Regan working today?" The woman looked up. She had a frazzled face of a manager. Her worries encompassed more than drinks and pastries. She'd likely had a bad dream or two about supply orders, sales numbers, and health department visits. "Nah," she replied. "Regan's not here." She said it so loud, not angry, just loud, that Carrie's eyes widened and his head snapped back. "Okay, is she coming in later?" He knew how creepy it looked for a man twice her age to be asking where she was, but he didn't have a lot of options. unless she'd planned to find him at the gym again. The woman slapped a dirty rag on the counter as she looked him in the eye. She's not going to be in for a long time, 'cause I fired her. Huh? What for? He couldn't help but ask. She tilted her head at him. What for? None of your damn business, that's what for. Are you going to order a coffee or what? Carrie had nothing left to say to the woman and turned to walk out. I'll take a coffee, said Michelle. Then she saw the look she got from Johnny and Carrie as she frowned at them. What? I'm usually asleep by now. They waited for her awkwardly while the guy in the corner was laughing quietly to himself, clicking away as he did. Michelle got out her coffee, tipped it to the lady, and they headed out. Their only lead was out the window, and worst of all, Carrie was going to have to go back to the gym. He was really going to end up getting his money's worth. The sun peeked between a sandwich shop and a bike store across the street. Carrie had to shield his eyes to confirm what he thought he saw. Bruce out of the car talking to a girl. Talking to Regan? Bruce, said Carrie as they walked up. Oh, hey guys, Bruce waved. I ran into Regan here. She was leaving. She looked up at Carrie and smiled. Hey, Barnyard told me you came by to see me. Barnyard, said Johnny. You two got familiar real quick. Regan laughed. My dad is a big fan. I think he still has a poster from his college down in our basement. I've got to sign something for her to take back to him, said Bruce. Carrie, what you got in your car? A bunch of trash, said Carrie. Definitely not a football. Then he turned to Regan. So you okay? Yeah, why wouldn't I be? Your boss said she fired you. Regan laughed again. She thought she was protecting me. Sometimes we get creepers in there. I was in the back and I heard her talking loud. That's usually the cue, so I figured I was due a 15. I came out here and saw Mr. Barnyard. Johnny bent over laughing. Mr. Barnyard! Oh man, I'm totally calling you that from now on. Better than a lot of things you call me, said Bruce. Carrie had a serious look on his face when he grabbed Regan's arm. Regan, I need you to be honest with me. She nodded, sobering up. About what? Kirby? No. Carrie shook his head. Have you been following me? Following you? Carrie sighed. Do you have the paper? She looked confused. What paper? What are you talking about? Bruce put a hand on Carrie's shoulder. I don't think it was her, Carrie. Really? Carrie kept staring at her, trying to read any deceit. Really what? Regan's confusion turned defensive. What's going on? How did you find me at the gym last night? She crossed her arms, as if to cover herself from him. 'Cause that's the only good gym in town, and I go there every night if I can. I know it's hard to tell. She held out her hands, palms out to display her body. I saw you on the treadmills and couldn't believe it was the same guy from the day. Well, you know. I told myself I'd ask you about it if I ever saw you again, and there you were. Carrie stepped back like a TV detective contemplating the facts before turning to the camera to make his revelation, only he kept his revelation in his head, along with silently kicking himself for thinking it was Regan. Carrie, she asked. Sorry, I didn't mean to accuse you. It was just weird for you to come out of the blue like that yesterday. I'm sorry, too. I just wanted to know about my friend. She cocked her head. So what's this paper you're talking about? You don't want to know. Oh, come on. You come out here to stalk me at my work and you're not going to tell me what it's really about? Carrie thought for a second. Nope. It's just not something you need to worry about. When you're 40 and divorced, let me know. That's a weird thing to say. Johnny patted Carrie on the shoulder. He's a weird guy. Sorry to bother you, said Carrie. Have a good rest of your shift. He tried to smile. If you still work here. She returned his smile. I think I do. We'll see. Thanks for stopping by, I guess. With that, she started back towards the cafe, shaking her head. Well, that got us nowhere, said Johnny. Now what? I've got another idea. Carrie's focus was off Regan. But it won't be as easy as that. They got back into his Taurus and he started off towards the graveyard. As they rode, Michelle asked, What's the male equivalent of a cougar? Like a manther? Said Johnny. No, said Bruce. I think it's a rhino. Seriously, guys, Carrie eyed the rearview mirror. There's nothing there. Maybe not from your side, said Michelle, but from her side, she wants some of that 401k action. Carrie had no reply as they all laughed. He just drove on with a slight smile, It was nice to know not all the female population found him repulsive, even if it was a confused, misguided youth. That's the end of chapter 11. We'll be back next week with chapter 12.